Homeless boy asks Drake for a piece of bread, but what he does next will make you cry. It was a hot Saturday afternoon in Toronto. The strong sun reflected in the shop windows, and the movement in the streets was intense. On the corner of a cozy, fragrant bakery, the smell of fresh bread mingled with the noise of passing cars. Drake, the famous pop singer, had just left the bakery, holding a bag of warm bread in one hand and his cell phone in the other. He wore a black leather jacket, ripped jeans, and impeccable white sneakers. His face was partially covered by a dark gap, but the watchful eyes of the fans did not let his presence escape. He was in a hurry. He had an important appointment that night, a charity event he couldn't miss. But as he opened the door of his luxury car parked on the sidewalk, he heard a faint voice behind him. "Young man, can you give me a piece of bread?" Drake turned around and came face to face with a skinny boy with dirty clothes and big, sad eyes. The boy must have been about 10 years old, but he looked even younger due to his thin body and tired look. His disheveled hair covered part of his forehead, and he held a torn backpack with the straps almost loose. For a moment, Drake stood still, unresponsive. He was so used to the spotlight and the attention of the crowds that a scene like that seemed like a reality check. It was not common for him to deal directly with situations like this, although he had always helped with charity campaigns and charity events. But there, at that moment, without cameras and without planning, his mind froze. "What's your name?" Drake asked, bending down to be at the boy's height. "Gabriel, sir," the boy replied in a low voice, looking away from the bag of bread in the pop singer's hand. Drake took a deep breath, trying to process what he felt. Some people around were already beginning to notice the scene and whisper among themselves, pulling out their cell phones to record the moment. He knew that anything he did could quickly make the news. "Are you hungry, Gabriel?" he asked, even though he already knew the answer. The boy just nodded, his eyes still fixed on the packet of bread. Drake felt a tightness in his heart, as if that simple gesture of a request had crossed his soul. He could just hand over a loaf of bread and go on his way, but something inside him screamed that he needed to do more. "Come with me," Drake said, reaching out to the boy. "Let's go in there again and you choose what you want to eat, okay?" Gabriel widened his eyes, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. A shy smile appeared on his face, and he looked at Drake's outstretched hand before holding it carefully, as if afraid the gesture would disappear. As they returned to the bakery, the murmurs of the people increased. Some took pictures, others commented among themselves, but Drake didn't care. He knew he was doing the right thing. Inside the bakery, the refreshing atmosphere contrasted with the heat outside, and the smell of fresh bread enveloped them again. The attendant, a nice gray-haired lady named Martha, looked surprised at the returning pair. "Did you come back so quickly, honey?" he asked with a warm smile. "Yes," Drake replied, pointing to Gabriel. "My friend here will choose whatever he wants." The boy looked at the windows filled with bread, cakes, and pastries, his eyes shining with excitement. He seemed almost in shock at the amount of options. Can I order that chocolate cake?" Gabriel asked, pointing to a large cake covered with dark syrup and colorful sprinkles. "Of course you can," Drake replied, smiling. "And a juice too, what do you think?" Gabriel nodded, trying to contain the joy that made his dirty face light. Martha, realizing the situation, was quick to prepare the proposal with extra care. Drake, as he waited, looked at the boy with a mixture of sadness and hope. How could someone so young be there, alone, asking for bread on the street? "Where are your parents, Gabriel?" he asked cautiously. The boy looked away, his smile fading. "I don't have a father. My mother..." He stopped, swallowing. "My mother left a long time ago." Drake felt a wave of sadness wash over him. He knew that pain of losing someone important. Martha returned with the plate and the glass of juice, and Gabriel began to eat with desire, as if he had not seen food in days. Drake sat next to him, determined to learn more about his story. For a moment, he forgot about the charity event, the messages on his cell phone, and even the presence of the people around. All that mattered was that boy in front of her, who looked so vulnerable and lost. "You know, Gabriel, sometimes life is hard," But there's always a way to change things, Drake said in a soft voice. Gabriel looked up, still chewing on a piece of cake, as if those words had some special meaning to him. At that moment, Drake realized that this encounter was no accident. It was a call to do more than just a gesture of charity. It was an opportunity to change a life, maybe even two. And so, unbeknownst to anyone, including Drake himself, a new journey was about to begin. A journey that would unite unlikely destinations and show that a simple act of kindness could change lives forever. The cool atmosphere of the bakery contrasted with the sweltering heat outside. The air conditioning softened the atmosphere, and the aroma of freshly baked breads, pastries, and cakes spread through the air like a comforting hug. As Drake and Gabriel approached the counter, the curious gazes of customers turned to them, some immediately recognizing the famous pop singer, others just intrigued by the unusual scene. Drake looked at Gabriel with an encouraging smile. "You can choose whatever you want, Gabriel. No need to worry about the price." The boy blinked a few times, incredulous. His eyes scanned the glass windows as if they were a magical world, filled with cakes covered in thick layers of chocolate, stuffed breads and carefully decorated pies. It was a banquet in the eyes of those who had been surviving for days with remains found in garbage cans. Can I really order?" Gabriel asked, his voice weak and hesitant, as if he feared that the offer might suddenly disappear. "Of course, you can, buddy. And how about a juice too?" Gabriel smiled shyly, his chapped lips curving into a sincere smile. Martha, the gray-haired attendant who had seen Drake enter just minutes earlier, was now watching him with eyes bright with curiosity and affection. "You can put the bigger piece in, Martha, and an orange juice to go with it," Drake said with the friendly tone of someone who was decidedly committed to making that moment special. "Certainly, dear," Martha replied with a motherly smile as she picked up the cake and juice. While the attendant prepared the order, Gabriel continued to observe the window as if he could not believe that he could really choose anything. When the dish arrived with a generous slice of chocolate cake covered in thick syrup and colorful sprinkles, the boy's eyes lit up with pure joy. "You can eat it, Gabriel. It's okay," Drake encouraged, sitting at the table furthest from the bakery, trying to ensure some privacy. Gabriel hesitated for a second but soon attacked the cake with desire. Each bite was received with closed eyes and an expression of genuine pleasure. Drake watched him, feeling a mixture of compassion and indignation. How could someone so young live like that? How did so many people pass him on the street and pretend they didn't see him? Drake felt his chest tighten. Perhaps he himself had ignored many children like Gabriel while rushing to appointments and concerts. "It's been a while since you've eaten like this, haven't you?" Drake asked, his voice soft and cautious. Gabriel nodded, still chewing on a piece of the cake. "A long time, sir. I don't even remember the last time I ate something so tasty." "You can call me Drake. And look, you can eat as many times as you want. It's not just today, you know," said the singer, trying to convey security to the boy. The boy looked up, his expression now mixing joy and fear. "Really?" Gabriel asked, as if that was too good to be true. "Seriously, champion," Drake replied, smiling sincerely. Around some people took pictures and murmured among themselves. Drake knew it would probably end up on social media, but he didn't care. Deep down, he knew that what he was doing was much more important than any image or comment on the internet. "And where do you live, Gabriel?" Drake asked, genuinely curious. The boy looked away, playing with his fork on the empty plate. "On the streets, I don't have a home. Sometimes I sleep at the train station, other times in abandoned buildings," Gabriel explained, with no emotion in his voice, as if it were just a fact of life. Drake felt his stomach turn. How was it possible that someone so young had to live like this? And why didn't anyone do anything about it? "Look, Gabriel, I want to help you," Drake said, his words coming out suddenly, but loaded with sincerity. "But I need you to trust me. And that means you need to tell me your story. How did you end up on the streets?" Gabriel looked at Drake, his big, dark eyes now glowing with something that seemed to be hope. I don't know, sir. I mean Drake. Gabriel corrected himself, embarrassed. My mother died a year ago and I didn't know my father. They sent me to an orphanage, but I ran away from there. They were bad. They did bad things. The boy's voice trembled at the mention of the orphanage, and Drake realized that it was more serious than he imagined. And since then you've been on the street? The singer asked, trying not to show the shock he felt. Yes, Gabriel replied quietly, his eyes lowering, as if he was expecting a scolding or a judgment. Drake looked at the boy in front of him and knew he couldn't just let him go. The empathy she felt for Gabriel was so strong that it almost suffocated him. Listen, Gabriel, Drake said, leaning forward. I want to help you find a safe place to stay. And I promise I won't let you go back to that bad orphanage. Endorsement? The boy's eyes widened, a mixture of relief and fear shining in his pupils. Sir, that is, you're not going to turn me into the police, are you? Drake smiled, trying to convey reassurance. No, boy, I'll help you, but for that, you need to trust me and come with me. Can it be? Gabriel hesitated for a moment, as if he were struggling with his own fears. But finally he nodded, his shy smile beginning to reappear. In that instant, Drake knew that this simple act of kindness was not the end, but the beginning of something much bigger. A journey that would forever change his life and Gabriel's. The fresh air of the bakery seemed a brutal contrast to the whirlwind brewing in Drake's head. Gabriel was now sitting in front of her, still enjoying the chocolate cake with an expression that mixed happiness and distrust. Drake knew that the decision he had just made was not a simple one. Taking an unknown boy away from the streets was a beautiful gesture, yes, but the reality was much more complicated than that magical moment shared in the bakery. Outside, some people were still taking pictures. The rumors should already be circulating on social networks. Drake wondered how many minutes it would take for his manager, Carter, to find out about it and start bombarding him with frantic messages. It didn't take long. His cell phone vibrated, and when he looked at the screen, he saw Carter's name. Drake ignored the call and looked back at Gabriel. He needed to solve that situation before anything else. Gabriel, I want to help you, and I'm serious, but I need to know what you want, Drake said, trying to be as clear as possible. Gabriel stopped chewing, his fork still suspended in the air. He looked at Drake as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. I just wanted a place to stay, where they wouldn't hurt me, and where I could eat. His voice trembled. The words came out in a whisper full of pain. I understand, Drake said, his chest tightening, and I want to offer you that. A safe place. But to do it right, I need you to come with me now. The boy looked around as if looking for a way out or waiting for someone to come along to interrupt that conversation. What if they find me? Gabriel asked, his eyes full of fear. What if they take me back to the orphanage? I'm not going to let that happen, Drake assured, his voice firm and decisive. But you'll have to trust me. Gabriel nodded, squeezing his fork so hard that his fingers turned white. Meanwhile, Martha, the gray-haired attendant who had prepared the cake, approached the table with a worried look. Honey, is everything okay? She asked, her tone soft but observant. Yes, Martha. It's okay, Drake said, trying to convey confidence. Just trying to help a friend. If you need anything, let me know, Martha said, before walking away with an encouraging smile. Drake looked at Gabriel again. I'll make a quick call, okay? I won't be long. Gabriel nodded, but his eyes showed an evident fear of being left behind. Drake stepped back a few steps and finally answered the call from Carter, the manager who was about to explode. Drake, for God's sake, what are you doing? There are people filming you with a street kid. The media is already speculating if this is some kind of campaign or new project. Do you know how much this can compromise our image? Carter practically shouted on the other end of the line. Our image? Carter, this is not about image, Drake retorted, feeling the anger growing inside him. It's about helping someone who needs it. Look, I understand you want to do something good, but there are appropriate ways to do it. You can't just pick up a child off the street and take him home. This is illegal. And what do you suggest I do then? Leave him here and go on with my life as if nothing had happened? Drake's voice sounded sharp. That's not it. It's just that you need to be careful. Let's do it right. I know some NGOs that can help, Carter suggested, trying to sound reasonable. No, I'm going to help Gabriel personally. I'll find a way. And if you don't want to support me, Carter, then I'll do it myself. The silence on the other end of the line indicated that Carter had sensed the serious tone in Drake's voice. Okay, I'll help, but you need to promise that you'll do it within the law. I'll look for someone who can guide you on what to do. And please don't do anything stupid in the meantime, Carter said, her voice lower but still worried. Great. Do, Drake replied, before hanging up the phone and returning to the table where Gabriel was anxiously waiting. It's okay, champion, Drake said, trying to sound optimistic. I'll take you to safety. But first I need to make a few more calls. A safe place? Gabriel asked, his eyes shining with hope. Yes. And you'll never have to go back to that orphanage. I promise. Over the next few minutes, Drake made several calls, activated contacts, and managed to find a trusted social worker who could guide him. But he knew he couldn't rely on the system alone. He wanted to make sure Gabriel was truly protected. When Martha returned to collect the dishes, she looked at Drake with an air of approval. What you're doing is beautiful, boy. But be careful. The best intentions can be misinterpreted, she said, her voice soft but full of truth. I know, Martha, but I'm not going to give up on him. Then good luck. Martha smiled before returning. To the counter, Drake looked at Gabriel, who was now holding the glass of juice with trembling hands. He knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges and people who would try to stop what he wanted to do. But at that moment, Drake was absolutely sure. No matter how complicated it was, he wouldn't leave Gabriel alone. Drake was in his modern, spacious home in Toronto, a place always full of friends, producers, and musicians, but lately that seemed empty. Now, sitting in the large living room with Gabriel by his side, that place was beginning to take on a new meaning. Gabriel looked around suspiciously, as if it was all a dream that could fade away at any moment. Her old, torn backpack rested next to her, a stark contrast to the sleek leather sofa. You can leave your backpack there in the corner, Drake said, trying to sound welcoming, and make yourself comfortable. The house is yours now, too. Gabriel did not answer. His hand continued to hold the strap of his backpack, his fingers squeezing the fabric as if it were his only protective shield. Do you want to see the rest of the house? Drake asked, forcing a smile to hide his nervousness. Okay, the boy replied, almost in a whisper. Drake guided Gabriel through the rooms, showing him the spacious kitchen, the recording studio, the bedrooms, and finally the room he had prepared for him. A simple but cozy room with a large bed, new clothes folded over a chair, and toys Drake had bought in a hurry, not even knowing if they were appropriate for a 10-year-old boy. This is your room, Drake said, opening the door with a half-exaggerated gesture. It's nothing very sophisticated, but you can change whatever you want. Gabriel looked at the room as if it were a museum, his eyes fixed on the made bed with new and clean sheets. Can I sleep here? He asked, incredulous. Of course. That room is yours now, Drake replied, laughing lightly. Gabriel approached the bed slowly, as if touching the mattress would break some kind of spell. When he finally sat down, the weight of his body made the mattress sink slightly, and he let out a sigh of relief. It's very soft, said the boy, almost smiling. If you don't like it, I can get another one, Drake joked, trying to ease the tension. But look, before you settle down, how about we eat something real? And then, maybe you'll tell me a little more about yourself. Gabriel nodded, but fear was still present in his eyes. A few minutes later, they were both in the kitchen. Drake had improvised a simple meal, sandwiches and fries. Gabriel ate in silence, but with a voracious appetite. Do you like music? Drake asked, trying to start a conversation. I like it, Gabriel replied hesitantly. My mother used to sing to me when I was younger, but after she got sick, His voice faded into thin air as if the memory was too heavy to continue. Drake took a deep breath. The pain in the boy's voice hit him like a punch in the stomach. It must have been hard for you, he said softly. It was, Gabriel admitted. After she died, they sent me to an orphanage, but it was a horrible place. They beat us when we made noise or when we didn't obey, so I ran away. Drake felt the anger rise inside him. How could anyone treat children that way? Look, Gabriel, I know it must be hard to trust someone after all of this, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. But I want you to know that you're safe here. I won't let anyone hurt you. Gabriel looked at Drake with a mixed look of hope and skepticism. Why are you doing this? Gabriel asked in a tone of defiance. That sounded more like fear in disguise. Because I saw you there on the street, alone, and I couldn't just turn my back, Drake explained bluntly. And also because I felt lost even though I'm surrounded by people. I know what it's like to think that no one cares. Gabriel was silent for a moment, absorbing those words. And do you care? The boy asked, his voice barely audible. I care. Very much, Drake replied without hesitation. And I want to help you have a better life. Gabriel's gaze softened, as if an invisible barrier had been partially knocked down. Drake knew it wouldn't be easy. Gaining the trust of a boy who had been through so much would be a slow process. What if I can't? Gabriel asked, his eyes downcast, playing with his fingers on the counter. What do you get? Drake asked. Be someone you want around, Gabriel said, his voice trembling and unsure. Hey, listen, Drake said, leaning in for the boy to look him in the eyes. You're already someone I want around. You don't need to change anything, you know? Gabriel looked at Drake, his eyes teary, but a shy smile was beginning to form. Okay, I will try. Gabriel's answer was the first step in the long walk that both would have to travel. Drake knew things wouldn't be perfect overnight, but there, in the bright kitchen of his home, something important had been achieved. The beginning of a true connection. Later that night, after Gabriel finally fell asleep in the new room, Drake sat down in his home's makeshift studio and let his fingers slide across the piano keyboard. The soft notes echoed through the room, composing a melody sad and hopeful at the same time. And as he played, Drake realized that this lost boy had awakened in him something that money and fame had never been able to achieve. The genuine desire to protect, care for, and make a difference in the life of someone who really needed it. The days that followed were intense and challenging for Drake and Gabriel. Although the singer had managed to convince Carter, his manager, to help him deal with the situation, the constant concern about the boy's safety weighed heavily on his mind. Gabriel still woke up in the middle of the night, frightened by nightmares that made him cry softly, trying not to make noise. Drake had dedicated himself completely to taking care of Gabriel, adapting his schedule to spend as much time as possible with the boy. She took him out to eat in quiet places, showed him around his recording studios, and occasionally taught him to play a few simple chords on the guitar. The boy seemed to blossom slowly, learning to smile for real. Even so, Drake knew that he could not maintain that situation indefinitely without an official solution. They needed legal and professional help. That's why he called Angela, a social worker recommended by Carter, who had handled complicated cases before. It's a pleasure to meet you, Gabriel, Angela said, sitting carefully across from the boy in the spacious living room of Drake's house. His voice was soft and welcoming, and his smile gentle. Hi, Gabriel replied suspiciously, his fingers tightening the edge of his shirt as if she could protect him from something bad. I'm here to help you, okay? I just want to understand a little more about what happened, Angela said with genuine patience. You can trust me. Gabriel looked at Drake, who gave him a slight nod, as if to say everything was fine. Gradually, Gabriel told his story to Angela, talking about the orphanage, the mistreatment, the escape, and life on the streets. The social worker listened attentively, jotting down a few things and asking delicate questions. After a while, he asked to speak to Drake privately. Drake, Gabriel's situation is very complicated, Angela said, as they walked down the corridor that led to the recording studio. There is a formal complaint about mistreatment in the orphanage, and this is very serious. But there's something else you need to know. What? Drake asked, feeling his heart race. During my research on Gabriel's past, I discovered something that he may not know himself. Angela paused, as if preparing her own heart for what she was going to say. Gabriel has an older sister. Drake blinked, confused. A sister? How so? They were separated when their mother passed away. Gabriel was sent to an orphanage, while his sister, Sophia, who was 12 years old at the time, was sent to another shelter in a nearby town. Only. Angela sighed, her eyes full of concern. Sophia ran away about a year ago and has been living on the streets ever since. The news hit Drake like a punch in the gut. Gabriel had been through so much, and now he discovered that, on top of everything, there was a lost sister out there. Oh my God, Drake muttered, running his hand over his face. And Gabriel, does he know that? I don't think so. At least he didn't mention anything. But if he knows he has a sister out there alone, it can affect him deeply. Drake took a deep breath, trying to process the information. What can we do? He asked, determined. We're trying to track down Sophia, but the truth is that children living on the streets can disappear very quickly, Angela replied with sadness in her voice. But I have some contacts that can help. I just need you to give me a little time. Time is what we have the least, Angela, Drake said, feeling the urgency pulsing in his chest. Gabriel needs to know that, and if Sophia is in danger, we need to find it now. I'll do my best, Angela promised. Back in the living room, Drake looked at Gabriel, who was now playing with a ball Drake had bought days ago. His movements were light, but his eyes showed constant concern, as if fear were his inseparable companion. Gabriel, I need to talk to you about something very important, Drake said, sitting on the couch next to him. What's wrong? Gabriel asked with a tone of anxiety in his voice. Remember when you told me about your mother? And that you have been alone since then? Drake spoke slowly, carefully choosing each word. I remember, Gabriel replied, already with a suspicious look. Well, it turns out you're not as alone as you think, Drake said, his tone soft but firm. During the investigations, Angela discovered, do you have an older sister? Gabriel's eyes widened. What? He asked, his voice trembling. Her name is Sophia. She was sent to another orphanage when you were separated, but she ran away some time ago, and now we're trying to find it. Do I have a sister? Really? Gabriel seemed unable to process the information. Yes, boy. And I promise you that we will find her. It doesn't matter how long it takes or how hard it is, Drake said, holding the boy's shoulders firmly. Gabriel couldn't hold back his tears. They ran freely down his face as he looked at Drake with a mixture of hope and fear. I thought there was no one else, Gabriel said, his voice breaking. Now you do, Drake said, his own voice trembling. You have me, and soon we'll meet his sister, together. The hug they shared in that moment was unlike any other. It was a hug that mixed pain, hope, and the promise that, no matter how difficult the journey was, they would not be alone. The search for Sophia became Drake's main mission. His musical performances were reduced to the bare minimum, and he began to use all his influence and resources to track down the girl living on the streets. He advertised on television programs, social networks, and newspapers, asking that any information about Sophia be forwarded directly to him or to Angela's team. Uncle Drake, do you think we're going to find Sophia? Gabriel asked, his voice unsure and his eyes full of expectation. Let's go, champion, Drake replied with conviction. And let's do it together. 2 weeks passed. During this time, Drake and Gabriel grew even closer. They developed daily routines that involved music lessons, games, and even movie nights. But behind every smile of Gabriel, there was a shadow of growing anxiety. Finally, the phone rang. It was Angela. His voice sounded trembling but full of hope. "Drake, we have a clue," Angela said. A teenager with Sophia's description was seen in a community shelter on the outskirts of the city. "We're going right now." Drake replied without hesitation. He and Gabriel left immediately. During the journey, Gabriel remained silent, his eyes fixed on the car window as the streets passed like blurs. Drake drove with a mixture of anxiety and hope. They arrived at the shelter in less than an hour. It was a simple but well-kept building, with walls painted in cheerful colors. A middle-aged woman with hair tied in a bun and gentle eyes greeted them with a friendly smile. "You must be Drake and Gabriel," she said. "I'm Cecilia, coordinator of the shelter." "Where is she?" Gabriel asked, his voice choked with anticipation. "Come with me," said Cecilia, indicating a corridor that led to a small room decorated with children's drawings. When they opened the door, there it was. Sophia, a thin teenager with a suspicious look, sitting in the farthest chair in the room. His eyes were identical to Gabriel's, large and expressive. When she saw the boy, her hardened face trembled for a moment, as if trying to understand if it was real or just a cruel dream. "Sophia," Gabriel murmured, his voice breaking. "Gabriel." Sophia's voice was hoarse, her eyes wide. In an instant, the boy ran to hug his sister, who held him as if his life depended on it. The two sobbed, mixing tears and disconnected words of joy and longing. Drake watched the scene with teary eyes, feeling the weight of all that pain and relief dissipate in a single moment. When Sophia finally let go of her brother, her eyes turned to Drake. "You're the guy on TV. The singer," she said suspiciously. "I am," Drake replied with a gentle smile. "But today, I'm just someone who wants to help you." Sophia looked at Gabriel and then at Drake, her gaze now mixed with curiosity and skepticism. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice full of insecurity. "I just want you and Gabriel to be safe," Drake said sincerely. "And if you allow me, I want to give you a home, just like I gave him." The teenager seemed to ponder for a moment, still trying to understand if it was really real. Do you want me to move in with you?" she asked, trying not to show that this possibility caused her fear and hope at the same time. "Only if you want to," Drake replied, his voice soft and firm. "The house is big enough for the three of us, and if you don't like it, you can leave whenever you want." The silence that followed was profound, almost sacred. Sophia looked at Gabriel, who stared at her with an encouraging smile. "He's nice, Sophia, really," Gabriel said, "and I want you to come with me." With a deep sigh, Sophia finally nodded, her eyes teary. "Okay, I accept," she said, unable to hold back her smile. The way back home was quiet, but full of conversations and nervous laughter. Gabriel and Sophia sat together in the back seat talking about everything they'd been through apart, while Drake drove with a lighter heart than he'd ever imagined. The days that followed were challenging. Sophia was not used to following rules, and the transition to a stable life was difficult for someone who had learned to survive on her own. But Drake was patient, kind, and above all, present. The media, as predicted, did not leave the story alone, but this time, Drake was ready. In a live-streamed interview, he spoke candidly about adoption, the siblings he had decided to protect, and the flawed system that left children like Gabriel and Sophia at the mercy of the cruel world. These children don't need charity. They need love, security, real homes, Drake said in the interview. "I'm not a hero, I'm just trying to do it right." The response from the public was overwhelming. Awareness and adoption campaigns gained strength. More people started to care. And Drake realized that by opening his heart to Gabriel and Sophia, he had found a much greater purpose than fame and success. That night, in the living room of Drake's house, the three of them were sitting on the couch, watching a movie, laughing, and arguing about what the best scene was. "Can I sleep here today?" Sophia asked, indicating the sofa. "You can sleep wherever you want, Sophia. This is your home now," Drake said with a sincere smile. She looked at him, and for the first time her face showed no fear, but something much rarer: confidence. And so, under the roof of that house that once seemed large and empty, Drake, Gabriel, and Sophia began a new journey. A journey that, despite all the challenges, finally made them feel like they were where they should be, together.